time with my peers who are also young like myself. And then we played and we talked, and then we realized that we need this place that will make us feel safe and will make us improve and develop ourselves and express ourselves freely. And then I was talking with my parents and with some of the adults that were in my life at that moment. And I didn't exactly know what we're gonna start. And then after a lot of conversations, we were like, why don't we start a school? Because that's what schools should be about. It should be a safe place for children to express themselves, to make new friendships, and of course to develop their skills. And that's where the idea was born. Really, it was from a very personal place, and it was as simple as that. And I've never said, or I never say that I've decided to help people, because I still don't say that I help people, because what I gain from them is way more than what I give. So I'm not just helping them, I'm actually collaborating or supporting them the same way they're supporting me. So I needed something from those children, and they were giving it to me, which is their friendship. And the only thing I could give them is this place that we can improve this friendship. And that's how we started.
That's quite inspirational for all of us over here, because like if we think about the times that we are in, that's quite challenging. And when we if we I'd been having conversations with you. So when we realize that the situation we are currently in the situations of lockdowns, in quarantines, that is the situation which refugees have to continuously live throughout their lives, whether they be in Syria, whether they be in Yemen, whether they be in Lebanon. There is that constant fear of attacks. So we have this question from Mr. Vinayak Dutt. Mr. Vinayak Dutt, can you please ask your question? I'd be unmuting you. Vinayak Dutt. Yes, sir. Please ask your question.
Sir, in present scenario, how the refugees are affected?
How the refugees are affected during the lockdown, you mean, right?
Mr. Vinayak? Mr. Vinayak?
I would assume that's the question, if I understood correctly.
Yeah.
Well, generally, I can talk only about let's say mostly about the Syrian refugees, because that's where that's my field of work basically. I mean, since COVID-19 started spreading in Lebanon, which is the neighboring country to Syria, and it's the second country that hosts most Syrian refugees in the world after Turkey. And let's remember also that Lebanon is a very, very small country with the population of almost 4 million and have 2 million refugees. So the refugees are actually the equivalent of half of the population in Lebanon. So that's really crazy, you know?
Yeah.
And when the COVID-19 started, of course, since the areas where the refugees live are quite vulnerable and quite exposed to COVID-19, so the military, the government immediately sent the militaries to those camps, and they closed them down completely. And throughout history, so since let's say 2012, when Syrians started migrating to Lebanon, the military and Syrian refugees did not have a good relationship, or generally any governmental sector. And the refugees didn't have a good relationship. Lebanon, as a government, is quite discriminatory. Therefore, when the military spread it during the COVID-19, that increased the fear for the Syrian refugees. And that's not talking about the poverty that they already lived in. And there's in certain areas in Lebanon, they lived in hunger. And since UN activities in Lebanon is not as active as it used to be, the COVID-19 affected a lot of refugees where they did not have access to any food, for example, or to any really small jobs that they already worked in, like waiters, like farmers, or all those things. When COVID-19 stopped, they lost their jobs. Therefore, they lost the only way they could get income to pay for everything. And those are the refugees who live in camps. So there's health risk. that increased because the camp is not prepared to of course, to protect you from such diseases, because they literally live in tents, in a plastic tents. And then there is, of course, the security when it comes to the military, as we've discussed, because as a citizen, where refugees don't have a good relationship with the military, and actually most of them are not registered in the UN, and that they will be considered as illegal refugees. If they caught by the military, they might be sent back to Syria, and that's a big issue. And then the last thing is, of course, the economical situation, which is, as we've talked, their jobs and their access to income. And those are the refugees who live in tents. Now, if we talk about refugees who live in small apartments, or so basically who pay rents for small apartments, they're not very much exposed to the security issue, but they're very exposed to the economical issue, because the rent for the apartment is way higher than the tents. Therefore, when they lost their income, they couldn't pay their rent, and which led to not only them living in camps, but them being homeless, completely homeless. So this is basically in Lebanon. This is the situation in Lebanon, and actually the situation, for example, in Jordan, when it comes to the Syrian refugees, quite similar. Now you have other countries like Greece, for example, who also didn't treat the Syrian refugees very well. So, for example, thousands of people from Syria who fled the violence and the conflict arrived to Greece since, I think, 2019, after Turkey decided to open the borders, because originally it was closed. But in the islands of Lesbos, Samos, and other islands, the asylum seekers were mainly targeted by not only the military or the control forces, they were also targeted by local population. And the camps that they've built in Greece to host the refugees usually hosts around 6,000 people, but there's around 40,000 refugees in it. So we're talking about a highly populated area that is not prepared to host that many numbers. And now there's COVID-19, so imagine how fast this thing can spread. And of course, again, there's security issue because they're being targeted by the local population. For example, I think 2 months ago, a camp got burned. And we're talking about the EU, which is supposed to be a country part of the EU. So Greece, which is supposed to be, the most peaceful and the humanitarian part of the world. But of course, it's not anymore, at least. So I think the situation of refugees generally, I don't talk about other refugees because I don't work with them, so I don't see myself in the place to talk about them. But from what I've heard, most refugees face similar issues. So yes, refugees did know what a lockdown feel before, but now it's not for refugees, not just a lockdown. It's their life is being threatened, and they're fighting for survival on 3 main bases, which is political, economical, and social. And I think it's a similar situation to a lot of refugees around the world. So I hope this gave you a wide scope about the situation nowadays when it comes to Syrian refugees, at least.
Thanks a lot. So we are receiving a lot of questions, and before we move on with the questions, we would like that if I believe that a brief introduction and the brief scenario that you have already explained, if you wish to emphasize on certain aspects, or you have some certain things in mind which you believe that we must understand as of now, I would request you that you please explain them, and after that we can move forward with the questions. And besides that, I would request the team members, Ms. Shreyanshi, Mr. Sparsh, Ms. Ritika, and Ms. Manshi, to please note down all the names of the people who are sending their questions on the chat, so that once Mo has completed, we can entertain the questions. I hope that would be great.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. You guys please note down the name of the people who are sending their questions, so that we can entertain them later. And before that, Mohamad can emphasize on certain aspects which we as laypersons might miss, but he indeed knows that they are important. Then they must be discussed first of all. Thanks, Mo. Please continue.
Of course. Yeah, I think, well, the thing that I think you guys will probably generally benefit from, or I think it's good for you to know, because it's hard for us, including myself, of course, to change, um, to make a wide, deep change when it comes to economical or political aspects of the struggle that refugees face. But the social one we can work on. And that's what basically what most of our focus is nowadays. So generally, people forget that a part of the refugees' struggle is them feeling welcomed, and refugees around the globe, and that's something dangerous, because if there's a social cleavage in specific countries because of those refugees, between the refugees and the local populations, that might not only harm the refugees' ability to go exist with the local population, it would also stop them from improving their social status or their economical status. And then when refugees improve their social and economical status, they will be able to contribute to the countries that have that hosted them. Like we've seen a case, I think it was in Uganda, where Uganda has passed laws that allow the refugees to buy lands or invest in lands or rent lands to do farming activities. And it's been quite successful, because those refugees that Uganda hosted were able to actually contribute to the national economy. But that didn't work until the local population demanded the government to allow those refugees to contribute to the economy. So they learned that the only way for both of the local population and those refugees to not face any, for example, economical neither or political challenges, were to coexist and to cooperate. And that's something us as local populations we can do. Other than that, of course, for example, we've talked about the EU. I live in Sweden, so I do, of course, benefit from the security and the respect of the human rights that EU provides. So I'm not gonna just say that it's a bad place, but generally the EU and the European countries, or the countries that are part of the European Union, protects the human rights inside their borders, and that's a misconception that people don't really understand. And we always perceive the Scandinavian or the European model as the most peaceful one. It is less violent than a lot of other models, but it's still violent. Because, for example, the EU, I think it was in 2016, has sent around 1 billion £1 billion, which is the equivalent of $1 billion of weapons to the Middle East. And a lot of countries, including Germany and Sweden, are on the top ranks of weapon export and weapon production. And a lot of their weapons goes back to the Middle East, which contribute to prolonging the war. And then they do what we've talked about to the refugees in Greece, even though they contributed to making those refugee waves. But then they shut down their borders because of COVID-19. They isolate themselves from the world, and they think about themselves. So they become self-centered. And that's something that no one have been discussing much. And we all talk about, we wish to have a European model of governments, but it's mainly protects itself. And even nowadays, protecting itself, they haven't been very successful. So those things, I think it was good to highlight. So if you guys have any questions regarding what I've said, please. Falit, I think you're still muted.
Really sorry. Okay.
Yeah, it's fine.
The point is that we have received a lot of questions, as you can see in the chat box. They are visible
Yes.
A lot of questions are there. So I request the team members to please point out the names so that we can unmute them and they can express their questions in their own voice.
Um,
Yes.
Hi, it's Manjushi. So the first one is Mr. Raghav Ranawat.
Mr. Raghav Ranawat. Okay, let me please unmute him. Mr. Raghav Ranawat. Yeah, sir, please ask your question.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So do I have the floor?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So thank you, sir, for taking my question. So during a past research and from conclusions, I found out that, at some point of time, all this crisis starts from an origin, and this point of origin has been imperialism and colonialism. So don't you think that these countries who are direct stakeholders of these crises should be accepting people? For example, Germany, because of its past actions by Adolf Hitler, has been accepting refugees freely. So don't you think countries like the UK and countries who are deeply involved in colonialism should be accepting refugees without any say so? That's all.
Yeah, of course, but realistically, we're talking countries don't like to admit that they've been colonialist at some point of their lives. Like, for example, Great Britain. Of course, it's one of the it's one of the biggest colonialist countries. But still, of course, they do admit that they have been they had colonies and they colonialism, but it's not a point of discussion nowadays. So demanding countries that have been colonialist at some point of history to accept refugees is not very beneficial. What we usually try, or what I usually try personally to focus on, is colonialist countries are still the same countries that are exporting a lot of weapons to countries of crisis nowadays. So I try to come around to have a conversation with them, to hold them accountable and to tell them that they are a very important stakeholder and an actor in the crisis that caused those refugees. Is not only their past, but it's also their present. They didn't improve much, so they're not openly colonialists now, but they still act as colonialist countries in a different way. There is, of course, I think you're all familiar with the phrase of neocolonialism, and a lot of European countries, including the UK, is still performing some neocolonialist activities. In a lot of countries in Africa and in countries in the Middle East. Like for example, a good example of a neocolonialist or imperialist activities that was the Iraq War in the US. Of course, the US never admit that, because for them they were going to reestablish democracy, even though they technically opened and took control of a lot of oil fields, which is a typical colonialist move. But coming from that perspective is true. So what you've mentioned is completely true. We should hold them accountable, but it's not beneficial. You won't be able to rally people behind you because it's history, and people nowadays like to forget history for some reason. Keep reminding people that thing happened and it's the main causes of all the conflicts. But if you want to hold them really accountable, we need to find evidence of their intervention at the moment, and that's generally is weapon production and exporting of weapons. And no one talk about weapon production and exporting of weapons nowadays. Even if liberals or leftists or other kind of political agendas, they don't bring it up for some reason. I didn't quite understand why much. But it's one of the biggest issues, and it's not only contributing to crisis like refugees, global issues like refugees. For example, the U.S. military, by producing weapons, they emit CO2 the same as a lot of countries like Japan, for example, equivalent or even more than Japan. The U.S. military only emits more CO2 than Sweden as a whole, all sectors in Sweden. So imagine how much CO2 is being emitted by all countries who produces weapons. But no one talks about that, of course, because flying is worse. But yeah, so I would say you're 100% right. That make them an important stakeholder and an actor in prolonging and in creating conflict, but it's not a strong point of discussion. Weapon production is a stronger point of discussion, I think it is. Falit, you're still muted.
Okay, I'm repeatedly committing the same mistake, and I request the team members that please point out the next person who would be having the floor and asking the question.
The next person is Mr. Agrim Mittal.
Mr. Agrim Mittal.
Unmute him.
Okay, Agrim Mittal. Agrim, yeah, old friend. Agrim, you have the floor.
Yeah, hi sir. Thanks for taking my question. So my question to you is that many times we think that the UN is actually helping, but what actually is the on-ground reality? Does the UN actually support them? If yes, is it even effective or not? And also, if no, then is the UN reluctant about helping them?
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's quite. It's a difficult question because at certain cases, of course, the UN is an important is an important actor in helping and supporting refugees. I mean, whether we like to admit it or not, the UN did take a lot of positive action to tackle and to support refugees in their struggles. The UN as a whole body, however, their power is more limited than we think it is, or than they claim, because they claim that they have power and influence, but in reality they don't much. And that's common mistake by large, or not common mistake, because they all do it, but it's a common thing. People try to claim that they do more than they actually doing, and the UN do the same thing, and then that generally create mistrust in people. So that's why we believe that the UN is not doing enough, or they're not, because technically they can't do. The UN as a body, they can't do the things they claim they will. I mean, they can't solve any of the 18 Sustainable Development Goals, because solving one means large businesses will lose a lot of their profit, and therefore it's not beneficial for a lot of parties and who have more influence and stronger than the UN in itself. So the UN is still part of the system that create the problems. So, and the UN still benefits from the prolonging and from the existing of the global issues that we've talking about. But to a certain extent, it's doing what it can, and to other extent, it's also contributing to the problem by not holding parties accountable. But it's a complicated thing. Can they do more? I think yes, of course they can. What they can do, what I always say, is to try to at least not prioritize, but to try to have a better understanding of the 18 sustainable goals that they always talk about. Because, like, for example, in 2015 or 16, when the migration from Syria was on its peak, the UN declared the Syrian crisis as the most important crisis at that time. They did try to do a lot. They didn't do enough. But then when for example, climate change became the hot topic and everyone's talking about it, they moved all their resources from tackling refugee and migration to try to tackle climate change, even though those two things correlate. And so the UN, like any other activists or like any other big organizations, humanitarian organizations, they don't necessarily just aim to solve the actual problem or the actual crisis that is happening, but they also try to follow the trend. So if now what's trendy is climate activism, we move all our resources to invest in climate activism because we can gain more resources and more money talking about climate activism. But then they forget all the other problems like poverty, like hunger, like refugees. And of course, like in the case of poverty, the UN has been celebrating that poverty is at its lowest these years. But the problem is, and we've always discussed this with other fellow activists, is like the poverty line is not very high. It's like, I think it's $1.9 or $2 now a day. And that still can't buy you much, you know. It can buy you just enough to survive, just enough to not die from hunger, or not die, or to buy a small, like to have a really small shelter. But it's not enough. So to their very low standards of poverty, yes, poverty did decrease, but I think humans generally have reached a stage of development where $2 is too little for one day. So people still, there's a lot of people who still live in poverty, even if they have $5 a day. But of course, to them, that's a great achievement because it's all about the numbers. It's all about how many people take $2. And let's also talk that they are the one who decide how much is they are the one who decide the poverty line and everything. So yes, of course, the UN is a great body and they've been helpful quite a lot, but they've also not been helpful quite a lot. And they've also acted as a business, or they've also acted as part of a capitalist system that also exploits issues. But it's hard. It's generally for large organizations like the UN, or non-governmental organizations, it's hard. It's not an easy task to change the world if we're talking about it.
Okay. Oh, I have one surprise for you. Your old friend Okelo is here as well.
Hello. Hello, Okelo.
Hello. Okay, he wasn't. No, he's muted. Wait a second. He's muted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I unmuted him and I made him the co-host as well. So now you can speak.
Hey, man.
Hey, what's up?
How are you?
I'm good, really good. You?
I'm good. I'm very good.
It's amazing seeing you again, man. Welcome to Studomatrix.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, so
you should be here big time. That did you hear, man?
Sorry?
Hello. Okelo, your voice wasn't clear.
I was like, you should be here big time, like really big time. We have a lot of stuff going, a lot of stuff happening. A couple of photography stuff writing, blah blah. You know, just trying to make sure kids are growing up, and then it's someone like you here as well, not only me.
Yes. No, of course. Until now, it's been quite interesting, so I'm gonna spend some time here.
Okay, great. Yeah, so I would, yeah. Okay, so I would request the team members to please point out the next person for the question.
Okay, so the next one is Miss Seema Basant Kumar.
Seema Basant Kumar. Okay, I'd be unmuting her. Seema Basant Kumar. Ma'am, please, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, sir. Talika this side. Thank you for taking my question. My question to you is, according to you, what is World Vision doing to help Syrian affected by conflict, and why is government being so unjust with the refugees?
What is World Vision?
Sir, your World's Vision doing to help Syrian affected by conflict, and why government is being so unjust with them?
I mean, generally, World Vision is like the organization. What they mainly focus on is refugees who lives in camps. They generally try to either enhance their economical situation or enhance their social situation. So, for example, doing workshop with women about women rights or human rights and equality. And other than that, they invest in local small businesses that have been started by the refugees to enhance their economical situation. So they've been doing good job. They've been doing great job. I don't think I'm not 100% sure because I'm not following up their news much. I don't think they're still as active as they used to be in the beginning, and I think they invested a little in the education of refugees. I'm not sure. Please go fact check me and make sure what they're doing on their formal website. But I'm not sure. That's the things I remember they did. Now, why the government's been harsh? Well, I mean, it varies from a government to another. For example, in Lebanon, the whole country is poor in Lebanon. They're drowning in debts. Now they are going through the worst economical situation that they have been in since the civil war. Lebanon had a civil war, and they've been a war-torn country, and the system of government in Lebanon is sectarian. So basically, different sects control different parts of the government, and what that means is, of course, there's a social division. So there's specific areas that belong to specific sects. Now, sects like sects of Islam or sects of Christianity, those are usually the ones who are in control. And considering that most of the refugees who came from Syria to Lebanon were from a specific sect in Islam, the whole government and the whole politicians got worried that if those refugees settled in Lebanon and became Lebanese in the future, that specific sect will become bigger. Therefore, they will be able to get their hand on more areas in Lebanon and possibly controls more parts of the government. And that, of course, push specific sects that control specific areas to resist those refugees and to try to send them back. Now, considering that Lebanon as a government benefited big time from refugees because the UN invested a lot of money in Lebanon, that benefited both Lebanese and Syrians. So technically, the Lebanese could not send Syrians back. So what they've been trying to do is they've been trying to make it harder for them to stay in Lebanon by having discriminatory laws. So for example, Syrian refugees in Lebanon legally, they're not allowed to work in any other sector except farming, house cleaning, so like they take care of house, or construction. Any other sector that the Syrian refugees works in considered illegal. And of course, the salaries in those three sectors are very, very low. And they face a lot of issues. Like, for example, I think 2 months ago, a Syrian guy who was working in construction in an apartment got shot and killed by the owner of the building because he wasn't doing a good job, and nothing much happened. So in Lebanon, there's no rule of law. It's how well connected you are. You improve you improve yourself. So this is for Lebanon, but generally speaking, I mean, for example, I think in Europe, let's say, governments in Europe and around the world don't perceive, I mean, honestly speaking, I don't think they perceive refugees generally plays two roles. First, making them look better, making them look humanitarian. So if a specific party is in control, welcoming refugees make them look better. So make them like sugarcoat their policies. And the second thing, they're workers. So refugees, considering that the vast number of refugees is usually young, so they're not older people, and in a lot of European countries, young people are needed. Young people who are active, who can work in the factories or those kind of jobs that doesn't require higher education, for example, or people with higher education doesn't necessarily aim for. Those are needed. So when they welcome refugees, those refugees usually immediately fill those places. So there's also benefit behind it. Now, when this benefit ends, like in Germany have welcomed a lot of refugees, more than they technically need, so more than they're benefiting for. the government changes its attitudes a little bit. And there's, of course, the social pressures. So people are afraid of what's new or what's different. So, for example, Syrian refugees are quite different from Europeans. You know, we we have different traditions, we have a different culture, we have a different religion, we have different values, and all those things. Of course, we're all abide by the same law in Europe. So, because there's one law that we abide with. But still, the way we deal, the way we talk, the way we dress is different from everyone else. Now, there's been some people who accepted that, and there's been some people who are afraid of what's new. And people who are afraid of what's new, they go to the party that represents them, which is usually a right-wing party, and then they gain power. And then, like any nationalist parties, or they want the purity of their nation, and that usually ends up being only Swedes, for example, or only Europeans. And then we go back to all the idea of racism. And then when the party's slogan are more discriminatory, the people become more racist. And when there's more refugees, the people are more afraid. Therefore, more power to the party. And this is basically it. So to answer your question clearly, why governments are doing harsh things, I think it's three main answers. First is they're afraid of what's new and social pressure. Second is the benefit is dumb. And what's the third point that we've talked about? And and third, because refugees cost, I think, or I forgot what's the third point I've mentioned, but I hope I answered your question.
Okay, great. Like, can we have the next one, please?
Okay, so the next question is by Vikhyat Bansal. Please make this on.
One request here, Mohammed. If the question that is being asked, it has been answered in the previous questions, you can skip it on. You can skip the question, or just it is not necessary to mention the details that you have already mentioned, so that we can cover a wider range of topics in the limited time we have.
Okay.
Yeah, Vikhyat, please. Wait a second. I need to unmute him for security. Yeah, Vikhyat, you have the floor.
Well, is UN blindsided by all these deals, or do they ignore what are the countries doing right now?
Can you please repeat?
Is United Nations blindsided by all these deals? Like, it is so open that you also know, or maybe some common people also know about these weapon deals. What do they do regarding that?
No, sir, I understand the question.
I am saying that is United Nations blindsided by all these deals, weapon deals, which happen between the countries, or like, do they ignore that?
Yeah. I mean, those, like, it's what we call them is like the untalked about topics. You know, like, you know them, but you don't want to talk about them as a big organization, because if the UN started claiming that those issues do exist, so they're basically holding governments accountable for things that the government is trying to not be held accountable for, the UN will lose its power. Because what's basically the UN is gain its power by its members, which happens to be the states themselves. So of course the UN in itself is also works for not only the benefits of the people, for the benefits of the state. So they also work as a coverage for those things that we've talked about. As I said, because this is basically, I think this is a big issue that no one is talking about. One, if not one of the biggest issues, is weapon production. The UN haven't been talked much about the weapon production, because they know that if they've started talking about it and holding or just highlighting the issue and highlighting the countries that contribute to this issue, they will lose power. And they can't, because, as I said, the UN is formed by its member, which are the states themselves. So if the states doesn't want to talk about it, the UN won't talk about it. And overall, the UN is not asked to, like, when it comes, for example, to the Iraq war, the Security Council did not give their approval for the UN for the US intervention in the Iraq war, but the US still went there, and what the Security Council did, nothing. They can't do much if strong states like the U.S. decided to do something. And then we're talking about the veto power. So, for example, when France tried to um, draft an article to hold the Syrian president accountable for the actions that he did in Syria, which is massacres, basically. Russia and China just vetoed the whole the whole article, and then nothing happened. So you have one of the biggest, most exploiting states in the world, like China, Russia, the U.S. or France, and who hold those veto power. And whatever the UN decides to do that goes against their benefits, they can simply veto it. So the UN can't make vast change. I think what we say that the UN, what they can do is try to hide what all the state is doing and try to help the people just a little bit so they can survive until the doomsday come, you know? But they can't prevent the doomsday. So they won't be able, unless the state decided, unless those big, large governments decided to contribute, decided to, for example, stop climate change, then the UN can say then, okay, we're gonna actually do that. Or if the states decided to stop weapon production or talk about it, then the UN will talk about it. But as long as the state is not doing or talking about something, the UN won't do it, neither talk about it. So that goes back to the idea that the UN is part of the system that still exploit people. So the UN in itself is still exploiting people. So yeah.
Okay, so I mean, the next question, please. Like Mohammed, if you can tell me if there is any time constraint.
I mean, let's take 3 more questions and then.
Oh, okay, great. So out of these 3, I have to ask one question because I prepared around 4 to 5 questions. I had certain questions and now to cut off my own questions. Yeah.
Of course.
So 2 more questions from these people, one mine. Next question, please. The team members. Hello.
Can I take one question, please?
Okay. So the seats are filling fast. Yeah. Next. So obviously that has to go to Okelo, and then we can have.
I would also like to ask the next question.
So first Okelo, then Sparsh, then maybe I would go. Yeah, or I would compromise my question. I would ask him in person. And the people over here can ask. Yeah. Okelo, please. You're muted. Okay, wait. Yeah. Now, please.
Okay, great. Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah, mine is not really a big question, but it's a question, but a request at the same time. And I know we had tough days over the week when we were in Davos, and I know Al Jounde, we went into different sessions. We saw the phase of the war. You know, we saw how people take and respond to refugee situation. Like you know, most of the world is drifting far away from the refugees as well, and it was tough for me as well. You know, talking and sharing refugee voices. What I would ask you is that can you kindly share, you know, your experience in Davos and you know the different approaches people had towards you when you meet different people in Davos. I remember you telling me something about you know, a lot of people not responding to your mails really quick, and some of them will just you know dump the mails and don't reply to them. Can you please? I wanted to share that experience. How does it feel to attend big meetings like annual meeting as a refugee?
I mean, it's Davos has been a very fun experience because it's everything I hate in one place, except of course all the young change makers that were there, and which also actually helped me to survive. Like all of you guys, Okelo, and everyone that I've met, they're actually helped me survive those 4 days that I've spent there. I mean, in the work that we do, which let's say activism, even though I don't necessarily like this word, in the work we do, which is activism, it's like any other business. You need to sell yourself in order for you to have quick responses, for example, emails. So that's the thing that Okelo is mentioning. Like a lot of people, especially as a young activist, they come to you and they tell you like, oh, you've done a great job. I wish like, tell me how can I help? And then you exchange emails, and then the next day you send them an email about how they can help, and then they've never respond. Because what they want is this one-time thing where they tell you that they like what you said, and then that's it. No one really wants to contribute the same way they talk about how they want to contribute. So that's the first thing. The other thing is, of course, the perception of young activists, because nowadays young activists are not necessarily just the activists, but they're also a brand name. So they've been used as a brand name. So for example, I've been invited to a panel in Davos, and they sent me this description of the panel. And under the things that I had to talk about, there wasn't written my name, they were written a refugee. So what they wanted is just to host any refugee. It doesn't matter who this refugee is. So for them, they just saw me as, and all the questions was like, oh, how's your life as a refugee? What struggles did you face as a refugee? What did your parents react as a refugee? How do parents react to you as a refugee? So they were very general questions that are very personal. And all the other panelists, some of them did way less than I did. Their questions were like, oh, how can governments and social entrepreneurs contribute to solving the problem of education around the world, for example. So they were like serious questions. But for me, they wanted to sell the sad story, the story about the sad Syrian refugee who fled the war-torn country. And that's what a lot of those international or a lot of those meetings perceive young activists generally. They perceive you as a climate activist, for example, and they see you as this person who have certain, for example, issues because of climate, or a refugee, or they perceive you as a person who, when they just see your experience as a story, but they don't see it as a lesson necessarily. And yeah, I think that's generally what the experience was like. Other than that, of course, it was quite beneficial. I've met a lot of great people, a lot of great young activists. I've built really strong networks with young activists, and that's why I go to those meetings, more to meet the young activists, or not very young activists, but actual like our good vision of activists. And I did of course talk about a lot of the things that we've discussed, but as I said, people don't like to listen to it. And actually there is, I think it was the president of the UNGP. And when I've talked about the Sustainable Development Goals and the weapon production and everything, he came to me and he told me that people don't talk about that. So that's how it was. It was interesting. It was really interesting. It wasn't the best experience that I've had, but I definitely learned about a lot of things, and I've met great people who taught me great things, like yourself, for example.
Okay, so
great. I had a tough day with one of the guys in the sessions as well, and they were like, refugees can fight for climate change, blah blah. And I told him straight to the face that I met one of my kind. I met Mohamad Al Jounde, and one thing I learned from him is that we cannot guarantee refugees fight for climate change, because they need to tackle stuff like education, finding proper job, good life, and if they can't solve that, then they can't solve the problem with the environmental issues. Like, as I'm talking to you right now, like 100 families got displaced, man. Like over the last 2 weeks, 100 families got displaced, and right now people are living in panic because of that. There had been too much flooding, the river is eating away the land, and we have a couple of casualties happening right now. Like 2 weeks ago, we buried one guy from Wales who was beaten to death by the policemen for no reason. So things are not really good. Things are. But thanks, man. Yeah, I learn a lot of things, and yeah, I'll keep going toward that now.
Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. So the team members, I request that, I guess there are plenty of questions that are pending. So I request that if you find similar questions, can you please club the questions and present the names of the people who have expressed the questions and simply club those questions which are similar or have been asked previously. And focus if you get some new questions, some aspects that have not been discussed, and again focus on the people who have not got a chance to ask the question till now. The ones who have already got a chance, you can skip them and they can send the question personally. We would forward them, or we can plan something next week or sometime after that when we get time. Okay. Can we get the next question? Sparsh, you had a question.
Yes.
Until then, the team members, please, you guys, please find the questions that you need to ask, formulate them.
Hello, Mohammed. My question was that many international organizations like UNHRC, they focus on the human rights only in some countries, like in Europe or in United States, but they ignore the rights of the humans in West Asia or Africa. So how could they be reformed to focus equally of all people? And how can we as citizens back these reforms or help in these reforms?
That's that's a hard question, man. I mean, the UNHCR, they've been is not. I don't know. Honestly, if you want me to answer you honestly, like I can't tell you how that big of an organization will be able to reform itself. I don't think they want to. So that's what I've been trying to say. I don't think they want to. So it's not that. Of course they can. If they wanted to, of course they will find a way to do so. I mean, who am I to tell the UNHCR or the United Nations how to do things or what to do? I mean, but the thing is, look, when such a large organization like the United Nations or like the UNHCR, which is a body of the United Nations, don't do something, it's not because they don't know how, because they have researchers, they're in the United Nations. but it's either because they cannot, so they are, as I said, because their power is limited by the states, or because simply they don't want to. And we need to accept the fact that the United Nations is limited, its power is very, very limited to the benefits of the states. And they're not pure good. There's a lot of things that they don't do, even though they're good. They don't do it, even though they're the benefit of the greater, or even if they're for the greater, they just don't do it. And when we accept that facts, then we can actually hold the people who needs to be held accountable. And then we can actually try to look about other solutions, like becoming your own activist, like supporting other organizations like World Vision, like other smaller organizations, for example, or bigger organizations are doing something different. You can look at different solutions. But the UN is not the solution for everything, and they've never been, and they will never be, you know? So I can't tell you how they can reform themselves. I can just tell you that they probably don't want to reform themselves. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Can we have the next question? Like maybe the last one, or I have the last one after that. Yeah, please. Team members. Hello. Can you guys hear me? I have not muted myself this time. I know. Hello.
Yes, can we take up a question by Mr. Sneh Ashish Gupta?
Yeah, sure. Mr. Sneh Ashish Gupta. Wait, let me unmute him. Sneh Ashish Gupta, unmuted. Yeah, you have the floor, sir.
Sir, considering the fact that if Western countries stop arms trade, then would the void be filled by undemocratic regimes like Russia and China, further complicating matters? And how about dealing with this issue with those who are the gloves? Like Western world, the first world countries are hands in glove in these conflicts, but the gloves are usually the Middle Eastern countries who are actually benefiting from the power struggles in Middle East, say Saudi Arabia and UAE. Shouldn't they also take refugees? So that they realize that what they are doing to their own Arab brothers is wrong, because they are actually benefiting from the power struggles.
Yeah, no, definitely. One of the biggest things that prolonged the war in Syria is of what we call a proxy war. So when Saudi Arabia and Iran start supporting the opposite sides of the conflict, and which ended up prolonging the conflict. And this is not the first proxy war that Saudi Arabia and Iran hold in the Middle East. Yes, for sure. I'm not against you, but let's all remember that also Saudi Arabia and Iran to a certain extent did not just started. Look, chaos in the Middle East is go back very like it's very old, but it's generally been started with the Iraq war. There's no with the Iraq war, but that doesn't mean there's one party to blame. I mean. Saudi Arabia is equally responsible to the conflict in the Middle East as the US, as Iran, as Russia. So no one is to blame more. Whoever kills and whoever contributes to a prolonging crisis that caused death is equally responsible. So responsibility is not relative when it comes to death. If you kills, you're a killer. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how much you kill. You know. But to answer your question is like, should they host refugees? Of course they should. Will they? I don't think so. No, they won't. Because what happens in religion in the Middle East is a very important factor when it comes to politics. Because Saudi Arabia can't host anyone. Because Saudi Arabia is built on that the majority of them are from a different sect of Islam. Therefore, if there's been any there's any different sect or any variety that might cause issue. First, second, of course, there's the economical burden of hosting refugees that Saudi Arabia doesn't really want to hold. Now, can this change? Yes. Can we change it? Probably not. Who can change it is states like US, like Russia, like France, like the one who hold the actual power, like the European Union. Do they want to change it? Probably not, because they benefit from it, you know? Because it all comes back to the benefit. Like, look at Yemen. Like, Saudi Arabia is not just doing proxy war in Yemen, it's butchering Yemen. Like, people are dying from hunger there. And no one is talking about it. There's very few conversations about it, because no one wants to bother, generally. So should they host refugees? Of course they should. Should they be held accountable for the war crimes they've done? Of course they should. Will they? I don't think they will. The same way George Bush wasn't held accountable for his war crimes in Iraq war. The same way Russia wasn't held accountable for its war in Crimea. The same way China is not held accountable for its massacres with the Muslims. So people don't get held accountable when there's no benefit from them being held accountable. And that's something that we should remember, that we still live in a system that prioritizes profit over anything else, basically. Well, I hope I answered your question.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess can we accept some more questions, or we are ended? Like, it's finished the time.
I mean, 2 questions should be fine. I have until almost 11 or like 10:55 because I have another meeting.
Okay. So let's go with one question, and I'd compromise my questions. I'd compromise all my questions which we had. I had regarding Turkey, I had regarding Rojavas, I had regarding Kurds, I had questions regarding Israel and Palestine, and all of them are just literally finished because we are getting a lot of questions. So please, I request the team members accept 1 or 2 questions more, because we are short on time, as Mohamad said, and we need to accept his time deadlines as well. Like, please, can you tell me the name of questions? And one question that Ms. Tulika had, one question from Ms. Tulika, and the other, you guys, please, team members, decide. Ms.
We have one question from Raghav Ranawat.
Raghav Ranawat has asked, I guess,
I think
question.
he has already been covered.
Yeah,
He has already asked, but he has another
chance to Abhinandan Adhikari.
Okay, so we'd go with Abhinandan Adhikari first, and then we'd go to Mr. Tulika. Okay, Abhinandan, we have unmuted you.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Mohammed, sir, I have a question that do the affected countries like Syria look up to India so that the country can provide help in any kind for the betterment and upliftment of the refugees? Like how, according to you, India can provide help and work for the refugees?
I mean, I don't have a lot of knowledge about how India is contributing or how they can contribute. All that I know is that a lot of refugees did get, because India has its history of social division generally, and not only social division but also let's say like social mixture, let's say. So there's different cultures in India, there's different people, there's different religions. Your neighboring countries are quite different from you all, so you have experience, you have a historical experience in tackling such issues. And of course, you have historical experience in conflict between two states, like Pakistan, for instance. So I know that there's a lot of refugees who went to India to get trainings, to get trained about tackling all those issues and talk about it. Because as I said, in India, there is quite a lot of skills and experience when it comes to those issues. So that's the thing I know, yeah, I think that's it. But I don't think. I mean, I'm not sure how much India. I mean, of course, it's a promising countries, but it still also has to deal with a lot of issues, you know, especially nowadays with the COVID-19 and with the yeah. Other problems. I forgot.
No issues. Like that's not your specialty zone, okay? Yeah. So we can have the question by Miss Tulika. By the name of Seema, she was there most probably. Yeah, Seema Basant Kumar. Please.
I think she has already been covered.
Okay, she has already asked the question. Okay, so who can we have next? Can you please specify the team?
We can have Arav Upadhyay.
Arav Upadhyay. Okay. Arav Upadhyay. Yeah, please, sir. Arav, okay. Yeah, Arav, you have been unmuted. Arav hasn't asked any question till now?
No.
Okay, Arav, please. You have the floor. Oh, wait, Arav. He's not getting unmuted. Black magic in work. He's not getting unmuted. Don't know why.
We get
not getting unmuted. I don't know what he has put the black magic on this. He's disconnected the audio. Not possible. Can you please rather ask the question that he has written in the chat box? Mr. Sparsh.
Yes, he has not specified the full question in detail. Can we give floor to anyone else?
Yeah, okay, great.
Vinayak Dutt. What about Vinayak Dutt?
Vinayak Dutt, okay.
Okay.
Vinayak Dutt ain't here. Vinayak Dutt ain't here.
Falit,
yes.
Sir.
Yeah. Hello.
So can I ask my question?
Arav, is that Arav?
Yes.
Yes, sir. This seems to be an internet issue.
Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah. Wait, where is he gone right now? Arav. Hello. Your internet's working or not? Internet, you there?
I think we should give floor to other participants.
No, please specify the participant. Now I cannot find some person. Huh?
Pooja Sharma.
Okay, Miss Pooja Sharma has a question. Okay. Pooja ma'am, you have the floor.
Hello.
Yeah, Falit.
Yes, ma'am. हाँ, ma'am. Your voice is on.
Already given in the chat box.
Yes,
but I personally feel the entire topic which you have going through This is something that personally I want to say that all the governments should be responsible enough to look after the economic conditions of each and every citizen, whosoever is residing in the country. Is the voice clear?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, sure, ma'am. The voice is clear.
Falit? Yeah, this is the reason that I personally feel that every time, whatever
Can you
we
please?
have these
Hello?
kind of.
Yeah. Wait. Pooja ma'am, can you please repeat the question?
I'm saying just that whatever we are talking about and whatever we are going into considerations, the things of refugees and all these people, that how the government has to look and take care of the people. Firstly, the government should be so responsible to take economic conditions better for each and every citizen. We should not feel like that every time any odd situation comes and we throw out the people like weed outs. Ke bhai inki zarat nahi hai. We don't feel like that why we have to have these people, send them out of the country. Either they become migrants, either they become refugees, either they become any unwanted guest in the country. Why so?
Ma'am, your
So
question
something
wasn't.
there should be a legitimacy of the government also. Yeah.
Ma'am, the voice.
I think I've read your question on the chat where you said I personally feel that all countries should have some responsible government to improve the economic condition of their citizen and not to throw out unwanted weeds whenever they feel. True. I mean, they should. I think if I understood the question, why would they do so? Is your question why would they throw unwanted seeds or like refugees, for example, or why do they accept refugees?
Ma'am, the question. Ma'am. Internet.
Or if she can't, if she can't type it down, it should be fine.
Hello, ma'am. I've unmuted, ma'am. It's not clear. I guess we might have to end it because the voice ain't audible and clear. And can you please type the question?
She has already typed.
Okay. Can you please read out the questions first?
Yes, fine. Yes. Her question was that should we have a responsible government to improve the economic conditions of the citizens and not to throw out as unwanted weeds whenever the government feels.
Yes, I think we should. Is that possible? As I said, I don't know. But yeah, I think. I mean, the governments that we usually put as an example is the Scandinavian ones, like Sweden or Norway or Finland, and they're not doing it. I mean, they're doing it way better than any other state in the world, but they're not fully doing it. So we should. But we haven't been able to doing it until now. So why is that? I don't know. I can't tell you. I think weapon production plays a huge role because Sweden is the 9th country in producing weapons and still the most humanitarian country. I don't know how those things work, but yeah, I think we should.
Okay, and now one point that I have is that I guess, Mohammed, you would be happy by the kind of serious questions that you have received here in comparison to the ones you received at World Economic Forum.
Yes, of course.
I received quite a few serious questions.
I'm very happy. Thank you. And Falit, if you have a question, please ask. Because I still can't, because it's a meeting with the team, so I can have 5 more minutes. So please ask your question.
Thanks a lot. Like I've been following your stories lately. So this question is about the situation in Palestine. Your views about the situation in Palestine. Now, recently we saw that US earlier was playing the role of negotiator, and now it had shifted to the sides of Israel and supporting the acts of gross human rights violation, the annexation of the Palestine, the West Bank. So I wanted your views regarding that situation.
I mean, since we've been younger, we've always been taught that Palestine is the land of Palestinian, and it should be. So we should kick the colonialists out, and that's beautiful dream, because whether you like to admit it or not, Israel by logic is a colonialist country. They literally colonized and forcibly displaced Palestinians out of their lands. And all those resettlement methods or geographical engineering where they move where they move where they move part of where they move part of the population to a certain places so they can basically so they can have more control on them. So all those are colonialist states action. What my thoughts on it? I mean, it's nothing new. I mean, of course, the U.S. is gonna back us. It's always did. People think that now, like, oh, Trump is very backing it up, but he's backing it up more publicly. That's the thing about Trump. He's the devil that we know. You know, he does things very publicly. But like Obama, he used to do things that we don't know. Like during Obama's when Obama was in the office, the drones attacks and the detection of drones was on its highest. But no one talked about it because Obama knew how to hide it. So, like any other good U.S. president, they do bad stuff and then they hide it. But I mean, what my general thought about it. My dream is for Palestine to have the full state, but the reality says that there is one solution which might not even be available for now, which is two-state solution. So having a Palestinian state with its own government and then an Israeli one. But I don't think necessarily Israel will be willing to do so, except if there is, especially nowadays with the COVID-19, because look, the Israeli control most of the resources that the Palestinians have, so water, food, lands, all those things. And at the point of need, so if the Israeli state needed all those resources for itself, they will occupy it like anything else. Therefore, the Palestinians wouldn't have enough resources or enough infrastructure to have a state. They even they don't have it now. They don't have the infrastructure to have a full functioning state. So, so the solution of having two states doesn't seem very possible, but it is definitely more possible than Palestine getting back all the lands.
And
other than that, it's a lost cause. It's sad because you have a state who literally occupied another state throughout history, and no one has ever said anything about it.
Thanks a lot, brother. Like, I mean, I had certain thoughts about it as well, because I believe that they are generally pending the matters, because this current situation that is in, that cannot be a stable condition for long, because already we see that there is difference between the West Bank as well as the Gaza Strip as well. The Gaza Strip is already in the control of Hamas. Then they leverage them. Iran leverages Hamas, and then there are attacks and there are counter attacks. And regularly thousands of people are getting killed on those strikes. So what I believe is, like, I mean, I had been studying this matter for a lot of time. That's one of my favorite topics. So I wanted your views on that, and thanks a lot. And like, just let me know, like, whenever we can plan the next session and add certain activities in mind. We were also like what we was all you had already seen that there are a lot of people who are interested in these issues. So I just wanted to convey that if we had this plan, that maybe if people with Okelo in Kakuma in Kenya, or maybe in Sweden, we have students who are interested in these things. So we can make groups of students from all these 3 countries or other countries as well, who are interested, and they can jointly study these issues, on maybe produce joint studies and maybe research on these issues, research different aspects, so that they can understand the different perceptions that exist on these issues, on these situations. That was I had this plan in mind, and I'd been having conversation with you regarding it as well in the past. So I hope maybe it materializes in the future. And thanks a lot, Mohamad, for guiding the people over here, letting them know. And I'd be sharing the recording as well. We have the whole session recorded, like and Okelo, maybe we'd be planning next sessions as well. Thanks a lot to Okelo as well for being here. And with this, I would like to have your permission to end this session formally.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us.
All permission. Thanks, Al Jounde.
Thanks a lot, brother.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Oh, bye, guys.
Bye.
Falit, you're doing great. That's amazing. Bye-bye.
Thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye.